Hello and welcome to 10 More Ways to Read Picture Books. My name is Sarah Scoggin and I'm the Early Childhood Librarian at the Newburgh Free Library, Newburgh, New York. This is a follow-up to my previous video, 10 Ways to Read Picture Books, and I made that video in order to enrich the reading of picture books that you probably read a million times and are starting to seem a little stale. So let's get started with 10 more ways to read picture books. The first way is to read a book in an unusual location. So this is What is a Flower, Golden Book Edition, and this is the perfect book to read outside. Where I am, the spring flowers are just starting to emerge, but before long there will be dandelions that you could match with the real world dandelions. If you can't get outside, you could try reading a book in your empty bathtub or on a blanket on your kitchen floor or in a fort made out of blankets. Just someplace unusual to make it seem like an adventure that you're reading. Way number 2 is to play librarian. And the way you would do that is to take some picture books. I have 3 of them here. And you could use any number. Then you would have the child be the librarian and you're the patron. So you come in and say, I'm looking for a book that has a rooster in it. And they would look at the books that they have and see that this one has a rooster in it. So then they would say, oh, you want this book? And you might say, I'm looking for the biggest book that you have. And that might be this giant anthology of bedtime stories. Or you might say, I'm looking for an alphabet book. Or you could say, I'm looking for a book that rhymes, or a book that's blue, or a book that we read last night, or your favorite book, or you could invent any sort of clue, any feature of the book, and the older the child, the more complex and difficult you could make the clues for them to figure out what book you're talking about. So once they figure out what book you want, you can imagine you're coming and checking it out. You can make a little cardboard library card. I've linked that on the Newburgh Free Library website, how to print out a little pretend library set. You could check out the book. Tip number 3 is to play I Spy. This is Richard Scarry's best word book ever, and this kind of book works very well for this, but really any book you could use to play I Spy. So I'm just going to open it up too. We have this classroom scene here, and I could say, I spy with my little eyes something round. And the children could look, and they have a lot of different things they could say. They could say, this map of the world is round, this clock is round, this bell is round. And they could keep guessing until they figure out what you spy. And again, you can spy anything you can imagine. You could spy their favorite color. If it's red, something red. You could say, I spy something that starts with D for the desk. You could say, I spy something that starts with the same letter as your name. Just try as many I spies as they like in the book, and you can choose as many pages as you want. So that's tip number 3, play I Spy. Tip number 4 is alphabet hunt. So this is related to one I did in the last video. In the last video, I suggested picking a letter and going through a book and finding everything in the book that starts with that letter. In this one, you might want to try going through the whole alphabet. Something that starts with A, something that starts with B. On the first page here, this is Nice New Neighbors by France Brandenburg. There's a picture of an apple, very tiny picture of an apple that starts this book off. There's B is for bow. You go through and find all the letters. You might have to get creative for X. Maybe point out a box that ends with X. Or you could actually look at the text and find all the letters of the alphabet in the text. See how quickly you can find all of those. So, second way to do an alphabet hunt. The next tip is to sing your books. Some books, like this one, Baby Beluga, a Raffi book, illustrated by Ashley Wolf, is a song in a book form. So if you have one of these, I encourage you to sing it. If you have a book that's just an ordinary picture book without a song, you could try making up your own songs. Or I also will link some picture books that have tunes associated with them I'm thinking of Pete the Cat. So if you don't know the tune that goes with a book, you can hear it online. So try singing the book. Um, all your audience will appreciate any songs that you sing. Okay, tip number 6 is just a fun one. Try reading a book upside down. So this is Uni the Unicorn by Amy Krauss Rosenthal, illustrated by Brigitte Berenger. And you could just say, I think I'm going to read it like a fly standing on the ceiling, and read the book upside down. It might take a little practice to read the text this way, but I think that children will get a kick out of seeing you read it upside down. Tip number 7 is to create your own lift the flap book. Little children, especially toddlers, are rough on lift the flap books. They might not have the fine motor control to lift the flap without tearing it or bending it. So you could try making your own by putting a sticky note on the pages. So this is 5 little honeybees bend in books. And I just picked a page and I put a sticky note over. Well, let's see, what is it? Something? What could be out in the meadow? It's an ant. So I see that I have a little pink ant under my sticky note. So if they tear off the sticky note, it doesn't matter. It won't hurt the book at all. And you can change it up what you cover each time. I did not originate that idea. I got it from a website called Learn with Less, and I will link that in the description. Tip number 8 is to talk about the parts of a book. Children usually start off simple with just the front cover and the back cover. They may know that the side of the book here is called the spine. In official book speak, the top part of the spine right here is called the head. And I usually teach that to early elementary students because I tell them when a book's on the shelf, don't pull it by the head because it will start to crack the top. So we say pull it by the ears down here, not by the top of their head. So you could talk about the spine, the head. You could also talk about what we call end paper. So those are the papers that the ones that's stuck to the inside of the front cover, and the one opposite that. Those are the end papers. And in many children's books, there are illustrations that either add to the story or just additional art. Sometimes some of the most beautiful art is in the end papers, and also sometimes in the back end papers too. We have some art. So you could say those are the end papers, and let's see what we can see on those end papers. You could also talk about this page. Here is called the title page because it tells the title again. The title being set, tell them how the title is the name of the book, just the way they have a name. The book has a name too. If you wanted to get a really fancy, you could talk about the fact that when you're holding a book, as you would read it and you're looking at the page on the right is called the recto, which is Latin for on the right. And the page on the left, as you read, is called the verso, that is Latin for on the back, because the left-hand page is considered the back of the page before it. So they can be really fancy if you want to add that. Okay, the next one is to be a historian. And so we have here the town mouse and the country mouse, and right away we can tell that these mice are not dressed the way that we dress in 2020. So you could talk about what's different about the way that we dress. And this fancy umbrella, these kind of hats we don't really see anymore. So you don't have to be exact to know the exact year, but you could talk about the differences that you see. Or for example, here the mouse has got a big giant powder puff that she's using to put on her makeup. So you can just have fun with spot the difference between history or historical type things in a book and the modern time. And last but not least, if you really want to dig in, you can always count the pages. So this is Little Women Playtime Primer. So it's a board book version of Little Women. It's not really telling the story, but it's using quotes from the story to create a board book. Um, and this has 11 pages if you count the front and the back cover. So if the ones are really little and they can't count very high, you can count the pages in the board book because there's often 10 or fewer pages inside the covers of those books. So you could just count the pages. For a picture book such as this one, this is Hat Tricks by Satoshi Kitamura. And this one has 32 pages, 16 pieces of paper. That's a popular number for picture books. In fact, the vast majority of books that are published in America, picture books, have pages that are multiples of 8 because they take an enormous piece of paper 8 times larger than this and they fold it into little bundles of 8 pages. So that's why they tend to be multiples of 8. So you could count the pages in the picture. And as a sort of bonus 11th tip, I would say, is to talk to children about where does the book come from. So this is Fatuma's New Cloth by Leslie Bolian, and you could say, before you even do anything reading-wise, you could say, well, where did this book come from, depending on the age of the child, to introduce the idea that books are written by people, or if they already know all about authors and illustrators, to talk about, well, where do they get the ideas? And when they have an idea, how do they make the book? Who makes it? You can start talking about publishers and all the details of how a book is made, physically made. So that will be a little segue. Stay tuned for the next workshop online will be for writing with picture books with kids. So that's coming soon. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.